Hello YouTube, welcome to the Loop Line. This is a follow-up to my video on the Chennai MRTS. So if you haven't watched it, I suggest you do so. This video does stand on its own, but the previous installment provides extra context you may be interested in. Going by your comments from the previous video, opinions on converting this line into a metro are mixed, to say the least. Solutions for the existing stations are quite obvious. Open the existing stations to commercial real estate, and to do this properly, hand over these areas to the state with some kind of development agreement with RVNL. At the same time, get new trains and upgrade all the stations on this line. The shorthand for all of this is that this line should be handed over to CMRL and operated as a metro line. What exactly this line should be and how it should be operated is an interesting question we can explore later. Another thing that came up a lot were comments justifying the state of this line using low fares. I cannot stress enough how counterproductive this viewpoint is. Broadly speaking, no form of passenger transport turns a profit from just fare revenue. Even though roads cost money to build and maintain, most of them are free to use. Even airlines are only profitable because of their side ventures such as credit card and hotel deals. Even if this was not true, the fare argument doesn't work in this context, as the Chengalpattu Suburban Line in the same city manages much better ride quality despite operating with the same fare structure. A suburban ticket from Chennai Central to Chengalpattu only costs 15 rupees, and yet this line manages to have frequent service at a much higher quality with well-maintained infrastructure. So I would like you to excuse me for ignoring this argument. Let's talk about improvements now. For the stations on the line between St. Thomas Mount and Chindadripet, the upgrades are obvious. If nothing else, just a simple round of renovation will help a lot. I also think that putting these stations on the Amrit Bharat station scheme is useful. As for train operations, the speed restriction at Velachery needs to be fixed to let trains go through at 50 instead of 15, and any works necessary to remove the restrictions near Perungudi should also be done. If possible, the section between Thirumailai and Chindadripet should be relayed with ballastless concrete track to allow for higher speeds. Now let's turn our attention to the north end of the line. First and foremost, the RBI is not being cooperative here, meaning getting the land to fully double the line to beach is not an option. This is why I considered Fort as a terminus in my previous video, which many people agreed with. But since then, I found out that the curves on the line between Parktown and Fort are too tight to install points on them. So this is also not an option. You could terminate the line at Parktown, but that would involve installing points on this viaduct which has a significant gradient on it, and I'm not sure if this would actually be considered safe. At this point, it's obvious that trying to send the MRTS to beach is a lost cause. So where do we send it? What I'll suggest here goes well beyond the MRTS and aims to fix several issues in all the suburban lines out of Chennai. Before we start, let's briefly go over what you will be seeing for most of this video. This is a semi-accurate top-down map of all the tracks around central Chennai, including Basin Bridge Junction, Central and Beach stations and all the railways that connect them. The next part of this video will be quite dense, so I suggest you give me your full attention and not do anything else. If you don't, you will easily miss stuff which will lead to misunderstanding in the comments. If you need to do something else right now, I suggest you finish it before you continue watching. Let's quickly go over how trains use this network today. Currently, suburban and long-distance trains share a lot of trackage despite having separate lines on many routes. Suburban lines from Arakkonam to Central and Tambaram to Beach both have dedicated tracks, though fast suburban trains share tracks with express service. Arakkonam Line trains towards Beach share tracks with express trains from Vyasarpadi Jiva to Chennai Beach, and all trains towards Ennur and Gumudipundi share tracks with express trains, be it from Central or Beach. In addition to this, there are a few suburban trains from Tambaram that run through Beach to Gumudipundi. These trains use the Tambaram suburban line until Beach and share tracks with express trains from there. Now that we know how these tracks are used, let me take you through the changes I propose, starting with the MRTS. Today, after Chindadripet station, the MRTS turns east towards Beach. Instead, let's make it go straight. This line is already on a viaduct, so it can go over the tracks near the east end of the existing Park station and above Periyar Salai. This viaduct will run parallel to the Pallavan Salai road bridge. To do this hostel for the Madras Medical College needs to be temporarily relocated. Once the replacement viaduct is built, this hostel can be accommodated under the rail bridge. From here, I propose that the suburban terminal at Chennai Central have two of its platforms replaced by the MRTS. The MRTS line will take over the existing space used by the railway offices, and these offices will be moved to the MRTS concourse. The MRTS platforms will be partially over Periyar Salai and the station concourse will act as an overpass across this road. Thus, Parktown station is gone and I propose that Park, Chennai Central Terminus, the Suburban Terminus and the MRTS station be combined into one station and simply be called Chennai Central. The long distance terminus gets platforms 1 to 11, the suburban platforms numbered 12 to 14, the MRTS gets 15 and 16 and the existing platforms at Park Station will get platforms 17 to 20. The MRTS viaduct will now take over the space used by the Arakkonam Suburban Line, meaning all Arakkonam Line trains will now be sent to beach. Between Central and Basin Bridge Junction, there is an overpass carrying Elephant Gate Street. At this crossing, I propose a new station named Saukarpet. This station should be built with direct walking access to the Elephant Gate Police Station, Ground B of the Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium and to the Basin Bridge Coaching Depot. To do this, the station concourse has to be split across both sides of the road bridge, which itself needs to be modified to accommodate the station. After this, the MRTS tracks will slew to the right and the 4 express lines out of Central will slew left. The MRTS will come back to ground level at Basin Bridge Junction into the current platforms 5 and 6. Platforms 1 and 2 will now have the tracks for Arakkonam bound express trains and platforms 3 and 4 will have the tracks for Ennore bound express trains. Platforms 1 to 4 will be demolished and only the MRTS tracks will have platforms here. The 4 tracks heading to Ennore will turn east while the 2 express lines to Arakkonam will turn west. Right after Basin Bridge Junction, there is a road overpass and a junction for trains heading east towards Washermanpet. The direct connection with the express lines will be removed and instead these tracks will be connected into the Basin Bridge yard. Since there are no timetable services that use these tracks, this should be fine. The line heading north now has 4 tracks, 2 for express trains and 2 for the MRTS. At the center of Basin Bridge Junction, there is a rail over rail crossing where we cross over the Arakkonam Suburban Line towards beach. Let's talk about this line now. Since the Suburban Line into Central from Arakkonam has been abandoned, all Arakkonam Line trains will now go to Beach Station. This means we now need extra tracks for the suburban trains and we need to grade separate Vyasarpadi cabin. East of Perambur Station, the express lines will slew north and split in a flying junction built to allow trains to maintain 50 km per hour on points. These tracks will climb onto independent bridges and turn south, joining the express lines to Central Station. Thus, the new Vyasarpadi road bridge will have to be dismantled. Since the central-bound express lines have been elevated to follow the Vyasarpadi road flyover, the suburban line can simply be extended east under the express lines and the road bridge to the rail over rail crossing. This is where I propose a new station called Basin Bridge Cross. This station will have 8 platforms total, 4 at each level, with all suburban trains stopping here. This station will primarily serve as an interchange between the different suburban lines. Going east, the Arakkonam Suburban Line meets 2 other lines. The line coming from Korukkupet currently has 4 tracks which will be reduced to 2. The express lines from Arakkonam will merge with these tracks. The suburban line, however, will be elevated and Washermanpet station will be replaced by a new elevated structure with exits on both sides of the railway. To do this, the road bridge carrying Vijayaragavalu Road will have to be replaced by an underpass. This won't require any land acquisition since the bridge has a solid foundation instead of having pillars. The line coming from Basin Bridge Junction is reduced to a single track and will connect directly with the express lines under the Suburban Rail Viaduct. Same will be done for the sidings that allow trains to access the Royapuram electric loco shed. Just before Royapuram station, there is a road bridge carrying Suryanarayana Street. Since there is another bridge extremely close by, I propose closing this one. The reason this is necessary is because this bridge today has tight tolerances with overhead wire clearance. Since Washermanpet station is elevated and Royapuram station is at ground level, this space is necessary for trains to climb up to the station, which will violate the overhead clearances on this line. If it's really necessary, this bridge could be rebuilt to be taller or turned into an underpass. I'll let you decide. Royapuram station itself will remain unchanged, mostly because I think there is value in preserving the oldest train station in the city. However, I do want to see a footbridge added at the east end of the station to provide interchange with the new Royapuram bus terminus. Under the Beach Road flyover, the line turns south and we reach Beach Station. Here, the station will be reconfigured so that the Arakkonam Suburban Line and the Chengalpattu line can share the same terminus platforms, turning Beach into a fully through-running station. This will also free up some land on the west side of the station for a new ticket office and hall. Because of the location, I propose building an elevated concourse on top of the station and turning it into a shopping complex exclusive to MSME businesses, similar to the stations in Navi Mumbai. Affected shop owners can move their shops to this concourse once it's built. Thus, both the express and local lines can properly through run without any switching directly onto the line to Tambaram. Therefore, the new platforms 1 to 4 at Chennai Beach will be used by Arakkonam and Chengalpattu line suburban trains, and platforms 5 to 7 will be used to terminate fast locals or the occasional express train. The rest of the space will be turned into freight sidings. Beyond beach, the existing MRTS tracks will be removed and the 4 remaining lines will be realigned to allow faster running. The reason I propose this unification is to through-run suburban service between the Arakkonam and Chengalpattu suburban lines. With the proposed track layout changes, running a through service from Tambaram through Chennai Beach, Rayapuram, Basin Bridge Cross and Vyasarpadi to Thiruvallur can be easily done with fully dedicated tracks. This will unlock capacity on both lines since terminal capacity at Beach or Central is no longer a restriction. To take full advantage of this, all trackage in this area should be upgraded to take trains going at 50 km per hour. Faster operation would be nice, but it's not really practical given the tight corners and clearances we are working with. Fast suburban trains will continue to terminate at Beach and use platforms 5 to 7. Let's go back to the MRTS now. You will recall that we left this service at Basin Bridge Cross. Going north, we reach Korukkupet station. Because of the junction here, the MRTS will have to climb back onto a bridge. The existing station will be replaced with an elevated structure to allow the express lines from Washermanpet and Perambur to combine with the line coming from Central. The MRTS tracks will come back to the surface at Tandayarpet on the east side. All the stations on this line will be rebuilt to have platforms on the eastern track pair instead of the western pair as exists today. This quad-track arrangement will continue as far as Vimkonagar, where all 4 tracks will have platforms to allow express trains to stop here and allow interchange with the metro terminus. Because the suburban line has been separated, all loop lines on the express tracks will be removed. All freight sidings in the Tandayarpet and Manali industrial areas will connect directly with the express lines. North of Vimkonagar, the MRTS tracks will climb onto a bridge again and swap places with the express lines. The reason for this is because beyond here, all the freight areas connect on the east side of the railway, meaning freight movements can avoid crossing with MRTS traffic. At Ennore, the express lines will be slewed east and take over the space occupied by the freight sidings. The station will have extra platforms added and transformed into a new terminus for intercity trains. This is why I kept the express lines intact running through Beach. Express trains from Chengalpattu side that don't fit in Egmore station will be sent here to keep them accessible from the entire city. A typical express train coming here from Chengalpattu would stop at Kilambagam, Tambaram, St. Thomas Mount, Egmore, Beach and Vimkonagar. Not only does this provide a fast suburban service for free, it also boosts connections from North Chennai to the rest of Tamil Nadu. Beyond Ennore, the eastern track pair will be upgraded to high-speed operations and be used by express trains while the existing passenger lines are replaced by the MRTS. Track layouts at all the local stations will be modified to remove loop lines as they are no longer necessary. Currently, the quad track ends at Attipattu Pudunagar, which is the junction that serves sidings to the North Chennai Thermal Power Station and the Ennore Port. Beyond here, the express lines will become a new track pair to Gummudipundi with MRTS trains using the existing lines. At Meenjur and Gummudipundi, a set of loop lines will be built on the express tracks that will allow some trains to stop here. Gummudipundi station will be reconfigured to connect the new track pair to the express line heading north, turning the existing suburban line into a terminus. After all of this, we now have a continuous suburban line from St. Thomas Mount through Velachery and Central to Gummudipundi. This line will see a 6-minute frequency during peak hours and a 10-minute service during off-peak. Weekend service should be 10-minute frequency all day. Alternate trains on the north side will terminate at Meenjur and Gummudipundi with all trains going to St. Thomas Mount via Velachery. To get trains to and from this line, a set of ladder crossovers will be installed near Thiruvattriyur. Some of you watching will know that Gummudipundi is not the terminus of this suburban line. To serve the places beyond, suburban services that currently run to Sulurpeta will be replaced by MEMU services from Central Station and extended to Nellore. These MEMU trains will stop at Chennai Central, Basin Bridge Cross, Vimkonagar, Ennore, Meenjur, Gummudipundi and then make all stops to Nellore. These trains will use platforms 12 to 14 at Central Station. Platforms 12 to 14 will also be used to terminate the occasional MEMU services to Thiruvannamalai and Tirupati. I should quickly mention how services on the Arakkonam Chennai Beach Chengalpattu line will work. There will be 3 services total, namely Pattabiram E-Depot, Chennai Beach, Tambaram, Thiruvallur Chennai Beach, Guduvanjeri and Arakkonam Chennai Beach, Chengalpattu. Alternate trains on the Pattabiram route will terminate at Avadi. To do this, we need a series of miscellaneous upgrades on both suburban lines. Firstly, the Tambaram-Chengalpattu section needs to be quad-tracked. An elevated concourse similar to beach station needs to be built at Tambaram. The Kilambakam train station needs to be finished for interchange with the bus terminus, and Tirusulam station needs a new underpass to connect the station directly to the airport. Similarly, on the Arakkonam line, several stations need new footbridges and level crossings need to be removed. The line also needs proper fencing, especially beyond Thiruvallur. Now, why did I send all Arakkonam line trains to beach? Simple. Most people coming into Central Station today are not actually going to Central Station. They are transferring to some other service. By removing the central terminus, all I am doing is spreading out that transfer to many other stations. To transfer between any of the 4 suburban lines, today people do it at Central Station. Under this plan, half of all transfers are eliminated. If you want to go from say Chetpet to Washermanpet, you just ride your train through beach. Similarly, if you are going from any station on the MRTS to the North Suburban Line, you can simply ride the train through Central and Saukarpet. Transfers between these route pairs will be possible at Central and Basin Bridge Cross. Transfers to buses will be available at Royapuram, Central, Tandayarpet, Egmore and Perambur. As for metro transfers, the existing transfer at Washermanpet is boosted by running more service there, which will decongest Central Station. Once Metro Phase 2 is complete, additional transfers will open at Perambur, Villivakam and Chetpet for faster travel options to the Green Line. Making these changes to the center of Chennai's rail network will allow the suburban trains to fully operate with dedicated tracks and greatly improve one-seat rides. Let's now talk about the question I set aside at the start of this video. What should the MRTS be? A metro, suburban rail or some kind of hybrid? I think that this line should still be part of the suburban railway, but the existing standard for suburban rail needs to be improved. It's time for the customary miscellaneous upgrades. First, add escalators and lifts to every station and realign platforms to allow for level boarding onto trains. This will make the network wheelchair accessible. Trains will have automatic doors installed similar to the new trains being delivered to Mumbai. Similar to Beach and Tambaram, I also propose elevated shopping complexes above train stations at Perambur, St. Thomas Mount, Avadi and Gindi. The new Kilambakam station should get a similar elevated shopping complex with some express trains stopping here to allow interchange with the bus terminal. Next, ticketing reform. All suburban stations should have fare gates installed, all station entrances will be fenced and at-grade crossings will be completely removed, be it footpaths or roads. The Chennai 1 QR code will be printed on suburban paper tickets and be used for validation with these fare gates. The same QR code will also be displayed when the ticket is booked through UTS or Rail 1. The suburban fare gates should also have attachments to take payment from NCMC smart cards. This system will effectively unify the suburban rail and metro systems. This way, combined ticketing is possible with both the NCMC smart card, Chennai 1 app and combined paper tickets. To carry out these operations, a new agency called the Chennai Suburban Railway Operation Commission will be created. This agency will be jointly owned by the Ministry of Railways and the Tamil Nadu state government and will be supervised by Kumta. They will take over the EMU maintenance sheds at Avadi, Tambaram and Velachery and the suburban rail operations for Chennai. A new EMU maintenance shed will be built at Attipattu Pudunagar to store extra trains for the MRTS. In a previous video, a lot of people got mad at me for suggesting that several cities in India develop suburban railway systems instead of building metros. I should clarify that when I propose suburban rail expansions, I don't want people to accept the existing state of affairs. When I say suburban railway, most people picture a Virar local when what I actually mean is a German S-Bahn. Hopefully this clears up what I actually think needs to happen. I'm not advocating for us to suffocate in badly built environments. I want the existing built environment to be fixed. Replacement is not always the answer and India needs to learn to do brownfield projects to prevent endlessly clearing free land for new projects. Speaking of the environment, let's talk about air conditioning. In a city like Chennai, this is becoming increasingly necessary as summers are getting hotter and humidity stays high. Aside from the natural ways to cool this such as mandating tree cover and narrowing roads, air conditioning public transit will be very useful. The problem is that when adding AC to a suburban train, Indian Railways prices them to turn a profit instead of providing a service. This is why the current AC local is merely a tourist ride instead of a serious transport service. Instead of building a new train set, a much simpler and easier thing to do would be to simply add AC to first class. The fare for first class should be standardized to triple the non-AC fare. Simply expanding this and adding AC to an already premium product will be much more impactful than just buying one new train. This will allow passengers to choose between the two on every journey instead of forcing people to use one or the other. Those who decide to pay for it can now experience AC on every suburban service, while those who can't or don't want to can continue paying the existing fare. This will also make the first class section actually useful. Though the MRTS is basically covered at this point, there is a lot more left to talk about. One such thing is that there are many hybrid services today that use the suburban network but run much further. This includes MEMU trains to Tirupati, Vellore, Thiruvannamalai, Melmuruvattur, Puducherry and the services I proposed to Nellore. The way to handle these trains is, in my opinion, to run them on the express lines with a semi-fast stopping pattern. Let's go line by line to see how this works. MEMU trains west towards Arakkonam will stop at Perambur, Villivakkam, Avadi, Thiruvallur and Arakkonam. Track layouts on the Arakkonam line will be modified to add loop lines to the express tracks and remove them from the local tracks. This will be done at Ambattur, Avadi, Thirunindravoor, Kadambattur and Thiruvalangadu. The loop lines at Ambattur, Thirunindravoor, Kadambattur and Thiruvalangadu will be used to store freight trains, while the loop lines at Thiruvallur and Avadi will be used to let express trains overtake MEMUs. This way, the local tracks are exclusively used by suburban trains, while the fast lines are shared between freight, MEMUs and express trains. As I mentioned previously, the MEMUs from the Arakkonam and Nellore lines will use platforms 12 to 14 at Central Station. While we are on this line, let's quickly go over Arakkonam Junction. This is where the suburban trains terminate and the express lines split with trains towards both Katpadi and Renigunta. Because of this, a flying junction will be built at Puliyamangalam station to split the express trains towards both Katpadi and Renigunta. The express line towards Katpadi will be elevated through Arakkonam station, stopping at platforms 4 and 5 on the viaduct. Any switching necessary between the other lines can be accommodated under this bridge. This elevated line will go above the bridge carrying SH61 and resurface west of the Arakkonam goods yard. Under this bridge, the Arakkonam bypass line will be restructured as a flying junction and upgraded to handle trains switching at 50 km per hour up from 10 km per hour today. The connection to the freight yard will be maintained as it is next to the viaduct. Express trains towards Renigunta will use platforms 6 and 7 and the suburban trains will primarily use platforms 3 and 8. We shall look at platform 1 and 2 shortly. We already went over MEMU services towards Nellore, so I will not repeat myself. MEMUs towards Chengalpattu will start at Beach Station, sharing the terminus with fast locals. These trains will stop at Central, Egmore, Gindi, St. Thomas Mount, Thirusulam, Tambaram, Kilambakam and Chengalpattu. At Thirusulam station, loop lines will be built to allow express trains to overtake these MEMUs, while the MEMUs and fast locals stop here to serve the airport. Since the MEMUs only make one stop between Tambaram and Chengalpattu, passing loops here are not necessary. Bonus project, let's now talk about the line to Kanchipuram. For those who don't know, there is a line from Chengalpattu to Arakkonam via Valajabad, Kanchipuram and Thirumalpur. This line currently sees service from the Chengalpattu suburban line and a few locals dedicated to the Arakkonam Chengalpattu service. I propose that this line be combined with two branch lines to create a separate regional rail service. At the Arakkonam end, this new line can take over service to Tirutani with all locals from the city terminating at Arakkonam. To do this, the old alignment of the Thirumalpur-Arakkonam line has to be reused and the line should be buried in a trench to avoid interference with the Arakkonam airfield. These trains will use platforms 1 and 2 at Arakkonam and run under the express viaduct to join the fast lines to Renigunta. Once these trains join the express lines, they will terminate at Tirutani. On the south side, trains from Kanchipuram will continue past Chengalpattu to Tirumani station. Here, I propose a new branch line turning east. This line will go through Nenmeli, Thirukkalugundram and Payyanur, terminating at Mahabalipuram. The full service from Tirutani to Mahabalipuram will run once per hour all day as a regional rail service and will be separated from the other lines. All local trains coming from beach will be terminated at Chengalpattu junction and only fast locals will be allowed to run to Kanchipuram. This line also sees MEMUs and express trains which will continue running as they do today. Looking at a city like Chennai, you would assume that Suburban Rail is pretty much done, aside from a few small upgrades. Turns out, so much more is possible. A lot of this comes down to improving junction capacity and segregating different types of trains on different tracks. Currently, the only suburban lines with fully dedicated tracks are the MRTS and the Tambaram line. We already went over why the MRTS sucks, so I hope this explains why the Tambaram suburban line has such good bones. What I've done is try to replicate its success on all the suburban lines out of Chennai, and at the same time throwing in a few common sense upgrades. This plan is obviously very ambitious, but I think it's totally doable. Chennai is definitely the kind of city to invest in existing transport infrastructure to improve it. The MTC is enough proof of that. If anyone watching is or knows anyone in power or in a position to look at the technical challenges of doing something like this, please let me know. My email is always open and I want to convey these ideas to anyone who would listen. I know this video is a lot to take in. It was a lot for me as well since I've had parts of this idea for a very long time. If you didn't understand what I was saying or if the video was too complicated, Feel free to rewatch parts of it or ask your questions in the comments. That's it from me today. Thank you for watching and I shall see you in the next loop line.
कृपया लक्ष द्या. गाडी क्रमांक 12860 हावडा मुंबई छत्रपती शिवाजी महाराज टर्मिनस गीतांजली सुपरफास्ट एक्सप्रेस या गाडीची निर्धारित वेळ 4 तासाने उशिराने धावत आहे. या गाडीत 11:40 प्लॅटफॉर्म क्रमांक 3 यायची अपेक्षा आहे. प्रवाशांच्या असुविधेमुळे आम्ही दिलगीर आहोत.